The war had lasted 7 years. 7 long years of blood, fire, and death across 100 worlds. The Empire, once proud and unbeatable, had been brought to its knees by an enemy they could not defeat. Their warriors fell by the thousands. Their cities burned. Their hope died. Then the humans came. Captain Ho was not a tall man. He was not the biggest soldier in the United Earth Forces. But when he walked onto a battlefield, enemies ran. They had learned to fear him. He fought like no other creature in the galaxy. Where warriors relied on their natural strength and size, Ho used his mind. He set traps. He found weaknesses. He turned the enemy's power against them. In the final battle of the war, Ho led a small team of 50 humans against an army of 10,000. Military experts said it was suicide. They said humans were too weak, too soft, too small to face such odds. They were wrong. Ho did not fight the army directly. Instead, he destroyed their supply lines. He poisoned their water. He spread fear and confusion through their ranks. By the time the reinforcements arrived, the enemy army had already collapsed from within. Ho stood among the ruins, his armor covered in dust and blood, watching the enemy flee. The war was over. The galaxy was saved. Now, 3 months later, Ho stood in the Great Hall of the Council. The room was enormous, built to make visitors feel small and unimportant. Golden pillars rose toward a ceiling painted with images of ancient heroes. Thousands of alien dignitaries filled the observation galleries, all watching the small human who had done what their greatest warriors could not. Emperor sat on a throne made of black crystal. He was old, even by standards, with deep lines carved into his gray skin. His 4 eyes studied Ho with a mixture of gratitude and something else, something that looked almost like fear. "Captain Ho of Earth," the Emperor's voice boomed through the hall. "You have saved our empire. You have saved our allies. You have ended a war that was destroying us all. For this, we offer you the greatest reward our civilization can give." Ho said nothing. He simply waited, his face calm and unreadable. This made the watching aliens uncomfortable. They were used to people who showed emotion, who displayed their desires openly. Humans were different. Humans hid their thoughts behind quiet faces. "We offer you wealth beyond measure," the Emperor continued. "Gold, crystals, rare metals from a dozen worlds. We offer you land. Choose any planet in our territory and it shall be yours. We offer you power. A seat on the council itself with a voice in the future of the galaxy." Still, Ho did not speak. The crowd began to whisper. Emperor leaned forward on his throne. "And finally, we offer you the greatest honor of all. You may choose any one of my daughters as your bride, a union between earth and sealed in blood and tradition." At this, 7 figures walked into the hall. The princesses of. Each one was tall and powerful, standing nearly 8 feet high. Their skin ranged from deep blue to pale silver. They wore ceremonial armor that gleamed under the lights, and weapons hung at their sides. The crowd gasped at their beauty and strength. These were not soft, sheltered royals. These were warriors, trained from birth to fight and kill. Any one of them could crush a human with their bare hands. Any one of them would be a prize beyond imagination. The first princess was named. She was the eldest and the strongest. Her muscles were enhanced with military implants, making her capable of lifting a small vehicle. She looked at Ho with cold, measuring eyes. The second princess was named. She was known for her speed, able to move faster than the eye could follow. She smiled at Ho, showing teeth that were slightly too sharp. The third, fourth, fifth, and sixth princesses were equally impressive. Each one had been engineered for perfection. Each one had won battles and earned glory. The galaxy would consider any of them a worthy match for a hero. Then there was the seventh princess. She did not walk into the hall. She floated in on a hoverchair, her thin body wrapped in simple robes instead of armor. Her skin was pale blue, almost white, and seemed fragile enough to break at a touch. Her name was Lyra, and she was known across the empire as the Broken One. Lyra had been born without the strength gene that all carried. Her muscles were weak, her bones were thin. She could barely walk on her own, let alone fight. In a society that valued power above all else, she was considered worthless. A mistake, a shame to the royal bloodline. She kept her eyes down as she entered, not looking at anyone. She had learned long ago that meeting people's gazes only invited cruelty. Better to be invisible, better to be forgotten. Ho watched each princess as they took their positions before him. He studied strength, speed, the battle scars that decorated the others. Then his eyes fell on Lyra, sitting alone in her chair, trying to make herself as small as possible. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Ho began to walk. He passed without a glance. He ignored Sin's inviting smile. He walked past each warrior princess as if they did not exist. He stopped in front of Lyra. The crowd fell silent. Even the emperor seemed frozen on his throne. Lyra looked up slowly, confusion and fear mixing in her large purple eyes. No one ever looked at her. No one ever chose her for anything. Ho said. His voice was quiet but clear, reaching every corner of the hall. I choose this one. The silence shattered into chaos. Voices erupted from every direction. Some shouted in confusion. Others laughed in disbelief. A few seemed genuinely angry, as if Ho had insulted them personally. Emperor rose from his throne, his 4 eyes wide. You cannot be serious. She is. She is defective. She cannot fight. She cannot produce strong children. She brings nothing of value to a union. Ho turned to face the emperor. His expression had not changed, still calm, still unreadable. I have made my choice. But why? The emperor's voice cracked with frustration. We offer you the finest warriors in our empire. Women who have conquered armies, who have killed beasts that would give your nightmares nightmares. And you choose this. He gestured at Lyra with obvious disgust. The princess flinched, shrinking back in her chair. She wanted to disappear, to float away and never return. Ho looked back at Lyra. For a moment, something softened in his eyes, something almost gentle. I have my reasons, he said simply. The emperor opened his mouth to argue, but something in Ho's gaze stopped him. This was the same look the human had worn before the final battle. The look that said he knew something no one else did. The look that had terrified armies. Very well, the emperor said finally, his voice cold. The choice is made. The Princess Lyra is yours. Ho nodded once, then turned and walked toward the exit. He paused beside Lyra's hoverchair and extended his hand. Will you come with me? Lyra stared at his hand as if it were a weapon. In her entire life, no one had ever offered her anything except pity or contempt. She did not understand what was happening. She did not trust it. But something in the human's eyes made her reach out. Her thin fingers touched his rough palm, and he closed his hand gently around hers. Do not be afraid, he said softly, so only she could hear. I see what they cannot. Then he led her out of the great hall, past the staring crowds, past her sneering sisters, past her furious father. Behind them, the galaxy buzzed with a single question that would spread across 1,000 worlds before the day was over. Why did the human choose the weakest princess? No one knew the answer, but they would learn. In time, they would all learn. The ship was called the Iron Wind. It was a human military vessel, built for war but now serving as Ho's personal transport. The corridors were narrow and gray, designed for efficiency rather than beauty. To Lyra, who had grown up in golden palaces with ceilings that touched the sky, it felt like being inside a metal box. She had been given her own quarters, a small room with a bed, a desk, and a window that looked out at the stars. It was simple and plain, nothing like the luxury she had known. But it was hers, and for the first time in her life, no one was watching her with disappointment in their eyes. 3 days had passed since leaving, 3 days of silence and waiting. Lyra expected the cruelty to begin at any moment. She had heard stories about humans. Everyone in the galaxy had. They were fierce and unpredictable, capable of terrible violence. They had conquered their own planet through endless wars before finally uniting and reaching for the stars. Surely this human captain had some dark purpose for her. Perhaps he wanted to humiliate her family by treating her poorly. Perhaps he planned to sell her to someone. Perhaps he simply enjoyed having power over something weaker than himself. She stayed in her room, barely eating, barely sleeping, waiting for the nightmare to begin. On the fourth day, there was a knock at her door. Lyra's heart raced. This was it. This was the moment everything would change. She pressed herself against the far wall, her weak legs trembling beneath her. "Come in," she said, adding how small her voice sounded. The door slid open, and Ho stepped inside. He was not wearing his armor today, just simple clothes that made him look almost ordinary. In his hands he carried a tray of food. "You have not been eating," he said. It was not a question. Lyra said nothing. She watched him with the careful eyes of prey studying a predator. Ho set the tray down on her desk. "The food on this ship is not as good as what you are used to, but you need to eat. You will make yourself sick." Still, she did not move. She did not trust this kindness. Kindness always came with a price. Ho studied her for a moment, then pulled the desk chair over and sat down. He did not come closer to her. He did not try to touch her or trap her. He simply sat, putting himself at her level, making himself smaller. "You are afraid of me," he said. Lyra finally found her voice. "Should I not be? You are a human, a warrior. You have killed more enemies than anyone in the galaxy." "Yes," Ho agreed. "I have killed many, but I have never hurt someone who did not try to hurt me first." He paused. "I did not bring you here to harm you, Lyra. I brought you here because I saw something that day in the Great Hall, something no one else seemed to notice." "What could you possibly see in me?" The words came out bitter, shaped by years of rejection. "I am weak. I am broken. I am a mistake that my father wishes he could erase." Ho shook his head slowly. "That is what they told you. That is what they wanted you to believe, but it is not the truth." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small data chip. "Before I came to, I did research. I wanted to know about the royal family, about your culture, about your people. I read thousands of files, studied your history, learned everything I could." He held up the chip. "Do you know what I found most interesting? Not the war records of your sisters, not the political achievements of your father. No. What interested me most was a paper on xenobiology, published 3 years ago in a small scientific journal that almost nobody reads." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She knew that paper. She had written it herself, using a false name because no one would take work seriously if it came from the Broken Princess. The paper described a new method for treating the blue fever that kills millions across the outer colonies every year, Ho continued. The solution was elegant, simple, brilliant. Medical experts have been trying to solve that problem for decades, and someone figured it out in a few pages. He looked at her with those calm, measuring eyes. "That was you, was it not?" Lyra could not speak. No one had ever traced that paper back to her. No one had ever cared enough to try. Ho stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. "On Earth, we have a history of ignoring brilliant people because they did not fit what we expected. Women were told they could not be scientists. Poor children were told they could not be leaders. People with disabilities were told they had nothing to offer." He turned back to face her. "We learned, eventually, that this was foolish. Some of our greatest minds came in unexpected packages. A man in a wheelchair figured out how black holes work. A woman who could not speak invented new ways for computers to learn. We almost lost their gifts because we were too blind to see past their differences." Lyra felt tears forming in her eyes. She had never heard anyone speak like this. In society, strength was everything. If you could not fight, you were nothing. There was no place for other kinds of value. I chose you, Ho said softly, because your mind is the most valuable thing I found on, not your sister's muscles, not your father's power, your mind. He gestured at the small room around them. This ship has a full research laboratory. I had it installed before we left Earth, hoping I would find someone worth using it. The equipment is yours. The resources are yours. Whatever you need to continue your work, I will provide. Lyra stared at him. Why? What do you want from me? Nothing, Ho said. Or rather, nothing except to see what you can do when someone actually believes in you. The galaxy is full of problems that cannot be solved with weapons. Disease, hunger, environmental collapse. Your sisters could conquer 1,000 planets and still not fix these things. He walked to the door, then paused. But you could. I saw it in that paper. I see it in every file you have ever created. You have the mind to change the galaxy, Lyra. You just needed someone to give you the chance. He left without another word, closing the door gently behind him. Lyra sat in silence for a long time. Then slowly, she moved to the tray of food and began to eat. It was simple human food, strange in texture and taste, but she finished every bite. The next morning, she asked to see the laboratory. It was everything Ho had promised and more. Equipment she had only dreamed of using. Databases filled with research from 100 worlds. Space to work, to think, to create without anyone looking over her shoulder. She started with a small project, something she had been thinking about for years. A way to make crops grow in poisoned soil, feeding colonies that were slowly starving to death. Within a week, she had made more progress than she had in the previous 5 years combined. Ho visited sometimes. He never interrupted her work. He would sit quietly, watching, asking questions that showed he actually understood what she was doing. When she explained her theories, he listened with genuine interest. "You are different from other humans," she told him one evening. "The stories say your people only care about war." Ho laughed, a rare sound that surprised her. "The stories are not wrong. Humans do love war, but we also love other things: music, art, science, family. We are a complicated species, Lyra. We contain many contradictions." He looked at her with something that might have been warmth. "But perhaps the thing we love most is potential. We see something broken and we want to fix it. We see something weak and we want to make it strong. We see someone with a gift and we want to see that gift flourish." Lyra felt something shift inside her chest. The wall she had built around her heart, the wall that protected her from hoping, began to crack. For the first time in her life, she wondered if she might actually matter. Far away on 1,000 worlds, they continued to mock the human captain and his broken bride. They laughed at his foolish choice. They predicted disaster and humiliation. They had no idea what was coming. The first reports came from a small colony on the edge of space, a mining settlement called Station, home to 50,000 workers and their families. People were getting sick. A strange fever that started with purple spots on the skin and ended with death within 3 days. At first, no one paid much attention. Diseases appeared on colony worlds all the time. The medical corps would handle it, as they always did. But the disease did not stop at Station. Within a week it had spread to 7 more colonies, then 20, then 50. Ships carrying infected passengers moved from world to world, and everywhere they went, the Purple Death followed. By the end of the first month, over 2 million people had died. The Empire called it the Plague, named after the doctor who first identified it. They sent their best scientists to find a cure. They built quarantine zones around infected areas. They did everything they could think of, and none of it worked. The disease was unlike anything they had seen before. It attacked the nervous system, spreading through the body like fire through dry wood. Standard treatments had no effect. The virus seemed to adapt to every medicine they tried, changing its shape, becoming something new before they could pin it down. Emperor watched his empire begin to collapse. His people were dying by the millions now, and there was nothing his strength could do to stop it. His warrior daughters patrolled the quarantine zones, but you cannot fight a disease with a sword. You cannot threaten a virus with punishment. His advisors suggested increasingly desperate measures: burn the infected colonies, destroy the ships carrying survivors, sacrifice millions to save billions. It was the way. The strong survived, the weak were cut away. But even hesitated at such destruction. These were his people, his responsibility. Killing them felt too much like admitting defeat. Then someone reminded him about the human captain and his broken bride. 3 months had passed since Ho had taken Lyra away. In that time, strange rumors had reached. Stories about the princess working in some kind of laboratory. Stories about research papers appearing in scientific journals, brilliant work that no one could trace to a source. Some people laughed at the rumors, others ignored them entirely. But now, with death spreading across his empire, was willing to try anything. He sent a message to Ho's ship. The reply came within an hour. Lyra would look at the data. She made no promises, but she would try. For 2 weeks, Lyra barely slept. She studied every report, every sample, every piece of information the scientists had gathered. She ran tests in her laboratory. She built computer models. She talked to Ho late into the night, using him as a sounding board for her ideas. The virus was clever, she realized. It was not a natural disease. Someone had engineered it, designed it specifically to attack biology. Every time the immune system tried to fight back, the virus learned and adapted. It was like trying to catch water with your hands. But Lyra noticed something the other scientists had missed. The virus had a weakness. It needed a specific protein to reproduce, a protein that existed in blood but not in other species. If she could block that protein, the virus would starve. She worked day and night on a solution. Ho brought her food that she forgot to eat. He reminded her to rest when her hands started shaking. He never pressured her, never demanded results, just quietly supported her in whatever way she needed. On the 15th day, she found it. The cure was simple, almost embarrassingly so. A combination of 3 common medicines that, when taken together, blocked the protein the virus needed. It would not help those already in the late stages of infection, but it would save everyone else. Lyra sent her research to the medical corps. At first, they did not believe her. How could the broken princess have solved a problem that their greatest minds could not? They ran their own tests, certain they would find an error. There was no error. Within days, factories across the empire began producing the cure. Ships carried it to infected colonies. Doctors administered it to the sick and the healthy alike. The death count, which had been rising by hundreds of thousands per day, began to slow. Then it stopped. Then it began to reverse. The plague was defeated. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as the news spread. The princess that everyone had mocked, the defective daughter that her own father had called worthless, had saved an empire. Not with strength, not with weapons, with her mind. Reporters flooded space, all demanding the same thing. They wanted to speak to Lyra. They wanted to understand how she had done the impossible. But more than anything, they wanted to speak to the human captain who had chosen her. Ho agreed to one interview, just one. It was broadcast across the entire galaxy, watched by more beings than any event in recorded history. The reporter was a woman with sharp eyes and sharper questions. She sat across from Ho in a small room aboard the Iron Wind, cameras floating around them. "Captain Ho," she began, "3 months ago, you shocked the galaxy by choosing Princess Lyra as your reward for ending the war. At the time, most people thought you were either insane or playing some kind of cruel joke. Now, after what she has done, we all want to know. How did you see what no one else could see?" Ho was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was calm and certain. "Your people have a saying," he said. "The strongest branch bears the heaviest fruit. You believe that power comes from muscle and speed, from the ability to break things. You measure worth in destruction. He leaned forward slightly. Humans have a different saying. The pen is mightier than the sword. It means that ideas, words, and knowledge have more power than any weapon ever built. The reporter frowned. But humans are famous for their wars. You have conquered and destroyed throughout your history. Yes, Ho agreed. We have done terrible things, but we have also done wonderful things. We have cured diseases that killed millions. We have built machines that let us travel between stars. We have created art that makes people weep with joy. He looked directly at the camera. The humans who changed history were not always the strongest or the fastest. Many of them were sick or poor or different in some way. What made them special was their minds, their ability to see what others could not, their willingness to think differently. He gestured toward the door, beyond which Lyra waited in her laboratory. When I saw Princess Lyra in that hall, I did not see a broken woman. I saw a mind that had been trapped, buried, ignored because it came in the wrong package. I saw potential that your people were too blind to recognize. The reporter pressed further. But how could you know she would be capable of something like this? Ho smiled slightly. I did my research. I found her hidden work, the papers she published under false names because no one would listen to the broken princess. I saw brilliance in those pages, real genius, the kind that comes along once in a generation. He paused. Your daughters could conquer 1,000 worlds. Lyra can save them. Tell me which is more valuable. The reporter had no answer. Later that day, Emperor sent a personal message to the Iron Wind. For the first time in memory, he asked to speak to his youngest daughter. Lyra accepted the call, her heart pounding. She had not spoken to her father since leaving. She expected anger or perhaps cold indifference. Instead, she saw something she had never seen before in her father's 4 eyes. Shame. I was wrong, the Emperor said. The words seemed to cause him physical pain. About you, about everything. I measured you by standards that did not apply, and in doing so, I nearly lost the greatest treasure our family has ever produced. Lyra did not know what to say. She had waited her entire life to hear something like this. The people are calling you a hero, continued. They are building statues in your honor. Songs are being written about the princess who saved the empire. Everywhere I go, they ask about you. He bowed his head, a gesture of respect that emperors almost never made. I do not expect your forgiveness. I do not deserve it, but I want you to know that I see you now. Finally, after all these years, I see you. The call ended. Lyra sat alone in her room, tears streaming down her face. Ho found her there an hour later. He did not ask questions. He simply sat beside her, a quiet presence in the darkness. Was it everything you hoped for? He asked finally. Lyra thought about it. No, she said. It was more, and also less. She looked at him. The approval I spent my whole life wanting suddenly does not matter as much as I thought it would. Ho nodded. That is because you do not need it anymore. You know your own worth now. Their opinions cannot add to it or take away from it. Lyra smiled through her tears. When did you become so wise? I am not wise, Ho said. I just pay attention. Outside, the stars continued their ancient dance. Somewhere, on 100 worlds, people who should have died were living because of a princess everyone had called worthless. The galaxy was beginning to understand what Ho had known all along. True strength had nothing to do with muscles. Not everyone celebrated Lyra's success. In the shadows of the Empire, old voices whispered old complaints. They said the cure was a trick. They said the human had done the real work and given credit to his pet princess. They said tradition was being destroyed, that weakness was being rewarded, that the natural order of things was falling apart. General was the loudest of these voices. He was old, even older than Emperor, with scars covering every inch of his massive body. He had fought in wars before Lyra was born. He had killed enemies numbering in the thousands. In society, his word carried weight that even the emperor had to respect. And he hated what was happening to his people. "We are becoming soft," he declared at a meeting of the military council. "We praise a cripple for mixing chemicals in a laboratory while our warriors stand forgotten. This is not the way. This is not what made us great." The council members shifted uncomfortably. Many agreed with him privately, but few dared to speak against the princess who had saved millions. Had no such fear. "I demand a trial of worth," he announced. His voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. "Let the princess prove she deserves the honor being given to her. Let her face a true test, as all must." The trial of worth was an ancient tradition, rarely invoked in modern times. It was a challenge that could not be refused without great shame. The challenged party had to prove their value through some test, usually combat. If they failed, they lost everything, including their status, their titles, and their place in society. Emperor tried to object. "My daughter has already proven herself. She saved our empire from destruction." "With medicine," sneered, "anyone can pour liquids into a container. The trial of worth tests true strength, true courage, true spirit." He pointed a thick finger at the emperor. "Unless you wish to admit that your daughter is not truly at all." The emperor fell silent. To refuse the challenge would be to accept the insult. To accept would be to place Lyra in impossible danger. Either way had trapped him. Word of the challenge reached the Iron Wind within hours. Lyra listened to the report with a calm face, but her hands trembled slightly in her lap. Ho stood by the window, his expression dark. "This is wrong. You do not have to accept this." "If I refuse, I prove him right," Lyra said quietly. "Everything I accomplished will be forgotten. They will say I was too afraid to face a real test. And if you accept, will demand combat. You cannot fight him, Lyra. He would kill you in seconds." Lyra nodded slowly. "I know, but the tradition says I can choose the form of the trial. It does not have to be direct combat." Ho turned to look at her. "What are you thinking?" A small smile crossed her face. "I am thinking that perhaps it is time for my people to learn a new definition of strength." The next day, Lyra sent her response to the military council. She accepted the trial of worth, but she chose the battlefield herself. The dying plains of. When heard her choice, he laughed. Was a dead world, destroyed centuries ago by weapons that left the soil poisoned with radiation. Nothing lived there. Nothing could live there. The radiation was so intense that even soldiers could only survive a few hours before their bodies began to break down. "She wants to die on her own terms," told his supporters. "Very well, I will grant her that small dignity." But Lyra had not chosen by accident. On the day of the trial, millions watched across the galaxy. Ships from a dozen worlds gathered in orbit around the dead planet, their cameras pointed at the gray, lifeless surface below. They had never seen such ratings. Everyone wanted to see what would happen. Descended first, his massive form wrapped in radiation-shielding armor. The best armor technology could produce, capable of protecting him for several hours in the deadly environment. He carried a ceremonial blade at his side, though he did not expect to use it. The radiation would kill the weak princess long before he needed to strike. He landed in a valley between two dead mountains. The ground was gray and cracked, covered in dust that had once been living soil. No plants grew here. No animals moved. The world was silent in a way that made even uncomfortable. Then Lyra arrived. She did not wear armor. Her hoverchair descended slowly through the poisoned air, carrying her frail form toward the dead earth. In her hands, she held a single small case. Stared at her in disbelief. "You come to your death without protection. Is this some kind of surrender?" Lyra smiled calmly. "No, General, this is a demonstration." She opened the case and removed a small device. It looked like nothing special, just a metal cylinder with a few buttons on the side. She pressed one of the buttons and pointed the device at the ground. A fine mist sprayed out, settling on the dead soil. For a moment nothing happened. Then slowly the gray dust began to change color, first to brown, then to something darker, something richer. Watched in confusion as the change spread outward from where the mist had landed. The soil was transforming, the poison being broken down by something too small to see. The radiation readings on his armor began to drop. "What is this?" he demanded. "Life," Lyra answered. "Engineered microbes designed to eat radiation and transform poisoned soil into something fertile. I have been working on them for 6 months, ever since Ho showed me what my work could really mean." She pressed another button and more mist sprayed out. The change accelerated. The radiation levels continued to fall, and then in the transformed soil, something began to move. A tiny green shoot pushed up through the earth, then another, then dozens more. Plants that had not existed on this world for centuries were growing before their eyes, seeds hidden in the soil finally given the chance to live again. Stumbled backward, his 4 eyes wide. "This is impossible." "You wanted a trial of worth," Lyra said. Her voice was stronger now, clearer, carrying across the valley and up to the watching ships above. "You wanted me to prove my value to our people, so I ask you, General, what is more valuable, your ability to destroy life, or my ability to create it?" She gestured at the spreading green. "You came here to watch me die. Instead, you are watching a dead world be reborn. This is what I can do. This is my worth." The cameras captured everything. Across the galaxy, billions of viewers watched as the gray planet began to turn green. The radiation readings continued to fall. Life was returning to a place that had been dead for longer than most people could remember. Stood in the middle of this impossible garden, his ceremonial blade hanging useless at his side. He had come to prove that strength was the only value that mattered. Instead, he was being forced to watch a woman who could barely walk accomplish something his strength could never achieve. The tradition required one of them to yield, to admit that the other had proven their worth more completely. For a long moment did not move. His entire worldview was collapsing around him. Everything he had believed, everything he had fought for, was being challenged by this moment. Then slowly, the old general fell to his knees. "I yield," he said. His voice was rough, broken by an emotion he did not understand. "The princess has proven her worth beyond any doubt." The watchers erupted in cheers. Lyra closed her eyes, letting the moment wash over her. She had done it. She had won. Ho was waiting for her when she returned to orbit. He did not say anything at first. He just pulled her into his arms and held her close. "I was worried," he admitted. "I know," she said, "but I had to do this. Not just for me, for everyone like me. Everyone who has ever been told they do not matter because they are different." She pulled back to look at him. "You gave me this, Ho. You gave me the chance to become who I was always meant to be." He shook his head. "I did not give you anything. The strength was always there. I just helped you find it." Below them, on the surface of green continued to spread across the dead land. New plants pushed up through transformed soil. Birds released from the watching ships began to circle the valley, looking for places to nest. In the weeks that followed, became a symbol of everything that was changing in the galaxy. The dying plains were renamed the Gardens of Lyra. Scientists came from across known space to study her microbes, her methods, her revolutionary approach to healing damaged worlds. General disappeared from public life, his certainty shattered by what he had witnessed. Some said he spent his remaining years in quiet reflection. Others said he simply could not adapt to a galaxy that valued minds over muscles. Either way, his challenge had backfired completely. By demanding that Lyra prove her worth, he had given her the perfect stage to show the galaxy what she could do. The weak princess was weak no more. Not because she had become stronger in body, because she had shown everyone that strength came in many forms, and some forms were more powerful than anyone had ever imagined. 20 years had passed since the day Ho walked past 6 warrior princesses to choose the one sitting in a hover chair. 20 years since the galaxy laughed at his foolish choice. 20 years since everything began to change. The universe looked different now. Lyra's work had spread across known space like ripples from a stone dropped in water. Her radiation-eating microbes had healed not just, but 47 other dead worlds. Her disease research had cured plagues that had killed billions. Her agricultural innovations had ended famines on hundreds of planets. Where her warrior sisters had conquered perhaps a dozen worlds between them, Lyra had saved thousands. She was no longer called the Broken Princess. That name had disappeared from history, replaced by titles that spoke of what she had become: the healer of worlds, the mother of new beginnings, the quiet revolution. Schools were built in her name. Research centers carried her image above their doors. Children who were born different, who did not fit the expectations of their societies, looked at her story and found hope. If the Broken Princess could change the galaxy, perhaps they could too. Ho and Lyra had settled on a small world at the border between human and space. It was a green planet, covered in forests and lakes, a peaceful place far from the politics of empires. They had built a home there, a simple structure surrounded by gardens that Lyra tended herself. Their daughter had grown up among those gardens. She was unusual even for a hybrid, taller than most humans but smaller than. Her skin was pale blue like her mother's, but her eyes were dark and fierce like her father's. She had inherited the best of both species: her mother's brilliant mind, her father's iron will, and something else, something that was entirely her own. Could see both sides. She understood humans in a way never had. She understood in a way humans found impossible. She moved between cultures like water flowing through different streams, finding common ground where others saw only differences. When she came of age, she was offered positions in both governments: ambassador, advisor, diplomat, titles that had never before been given to someone of mixed blood. She accepted them all, traveling between worlds, building bridges where there had only been walls. The alliance between Earth and, once fragile and uncertain, became the strongest partnership in the galaxy. Not because of treaties or trade agreements, because showed both sides that they had more in common than they had ever realized. On the 20th anniversary of Ho's choice, a reporter traveled to the small green world to interview the aging captain. The reporter was young, barely old enough to remember the war that had started everything. To her generation, Ho was more legend than man, a figure from stories rather than flesh and blood. She found him in his garden pulling weeds from between rows of vegetables. He was old now, his hair gray and his movements slower than they had been. But his eyes were still sharp, still seeing things that others missed. Lyra sat nearby in a comfortable chair, watching her husband work. Her body had never grown strong, and age had made her even more frail. But her mind remained as brilliant as ever, still producing research that changed lives across the galaxy. The reporter sat down on a bench and activated her recording device. "Captain Ho," she began, "it has been 20 years since you chose Princess Lyra as your reward for ending the war. Looking back, do you have any regrets about your decision?" Ho laughed, a warm sound that filled the garden. He straightened up from his weeds and walked over to sit beside his wife. His hand found hers, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "Every warrior in the galaxy wanted a princess who could destroy armies," he said. "I wanted one who could build civilizations." He looked at Lyra, and the love in his eyes had not dimmed with time. "I chose the strongest person in that room. Everyone else was too blind to see it." The reporter pressed further. "But at the time, you could not have known what she would accomplish. You were taking an enormous risk." Was I? Ho shook his head. I did my research. I studied everything about the royal family before I made my choice. I found Lyra's hidden work. I saw what she was capable of, even when everyone around her was trying to bury that potential. He gestured at the galaxy above them, visible in the darkening sky. The risk would have been choosing one of her sisters. What would I have gained? A strong fighter who could win battles. We had plenty of those. What we needed was someone who could solve problems that weapons could not touch. The reporter turned to Lyra. Princess, how did it feel when Captain Ho chose you? What went through your mind in that moment? Lyra was quiet for a moment, her eyes distant with memory. Fear, she said finally. I was terrified. I thought it was some kind of trick, some new cruelty I had not experienced before. I had spent my entire life being told I was worthless. When someone finally saw value in me, I did not believe it. She squeezed Ho's hand. It took time to understand that he meant what he said, that he truly saw me, not the broken body I was trapped in. He gave me room to grow, resources to work with, and most importantly, faith that I could become something more than I had ever been allowed to be. The reporter asked her final question. What message do you have for the people watching this interview, especially those who feel the way you once felt, invisible, worthless, overlooked? Ho and Lyra looked at each other. After 20 years, they barely needed words to communicate. A lifetime of love and partnership had created a connection deeper than speech. It was Lyra who answered. The galaxy tried to tell me who I was, she said. They said I was broken, defective, a mistake. For most of my life, I believed them. I let their voices fill my head until there was no room left for my own. She looked directly at the camera, her purple eyes bright with emotion. Then one human looked past everything they saw as weakness and found something they considered strength. It did not change who I was. It changed how I saw myself. She paused. My message is this. Do not let others define your worth. The things that make you different might be the things that change the world. You just need to find the courage to believe in yourself, even when no one else does. Ho added his own thoughts. My people have a saying. It is not about the size of the dog in the fight, but the size of the fight in the dog. It means that courage and determination matter more than physical strength. It means that the small and the overlooked can accomplish things the powerful never could. He looked at his wife with pride that had not faded in 2 decades. I did not choose the weakest princess. I chose the strongest mind in the galaxy, and together we built something that will outlast us both. The interview ended. The reporter departed. Night fell over the small green world, filling the sky with stars. Ho and Lyra remained in their garden, watching the universe turn above them. Somewhere out there, their daughter was negotiating peace treaties. Somewhere, scientists were using Lyra's methods to heal damaged worlds. Somewhere, a child who felt different and broken was reading their story and finding hope. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had chosen differently? Lyra asked softly. Ho smiled, never, not once. He pulled her close, holding her fragile body as gently as he had on that first day. The galaxy measures worth in strange ways, he said. They count ships and weapons and conquered worlds. They add up strength and speed and size. He kissed her forehead. They forget that true power has nothing to do with destruction. True power is about what you create, what you heal, what you leave behind. Lyra closed her eyes, feeling safe in a way she had never thought possible. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me when no one else did. Thank you for being worth seeing, he replied. Above them, the stars continued their eternal dance. The light from 1,000 worlds fell on the small garden where a human soldier and an alien princess had built a life together. They had started as a joke, a foolish choice that everyone mocked. They had become a legend that would last for generations. Because sometimes the weakest choice is the strongest one you can make. And sometimes love sees what the whole galaxy cannot.